Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin revealed for PS5 and PS4. Soulslike developed by Team Ninja. Final Fantasy goes Soulslike with Stranger of Paradise. Final Fantasy Origin is the easier Dark Souls. Stranger of Paradise teaches Final Fantasy fans to enjoy the Origin review. Designers, trashy Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, Stranger of Paradise Dark Souls, Devil May Cry, and Final Fantasy. Wait, the developers say they don't consider this to be in the Souls genre? What's going on here? So is this a Souls game? Has Final Fantasy made the inevitable leap into the Souls-like, Soulsborne, Souls-ish, Souls-type, Soulsy, Souls-flavored genre? Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin isn't just another Square Enix title with a mouthful of a name. It's a pretty different take on Final Fantasy, acting as an alternate universe prequel to the very first game, and featuring one of the most bizarre protagonists to ever star in a game like this. It's also interesting to see how some of From Software staples have crept into yet another franchise. Titles like Demon Souls and Dark Souls have had a ton of influence across the industry, with many studios borrowing their mechanics and ideas. But how close does a game have to be to Dark Souls to be considered a Souls-like? Shovel Knight takes the whole grab your stuff from the spot you died aspect, but you don't see anyone calling it something other than a platformer. So how does Stranger of Paradise fit into this? Is it a Souls-like? Or just another action game that uses some Soulsy elements? Or does what you call it even matter? The clearest element that it borrows from Souls games is the inclusion of bonfires, although here they're a mess of cubes. Despite the aesthetic differences, they mostly function the same way, acting as a checkpoint and replenishing your health and potions, while also reviving any enemies you've defeated. I suppose if there's one mechanic From Software has introduced that can bring a lot to other games, it's the bonfires. It adds an element of risk and reward to the traditional checkpoint system. Bringing back all the enemies you've killed is a way of committing yourself to further progress in the game. It's a way of making you acknowledge that if you need to go back for any reason, you'll have to deal with those bad guys again. There's another aspect of Stranger of Paradise that's similar to the Souls series that's a bit harder to nail down with words. That's the framing of the camera and the character movement. There's no other way to describe it than by just saying it looks and feels like a Souls game. While the bonfire cubes are a clear lift from Software titles, I have less confidence that this similarity was intentional on the part of the designers. There's only so many ways that a camera can be framed around a humanoid character in a 3D environment, which leads me to think that they may have ended up in a similar spot by just going with what would serve the gameplay best. I don't think that replicating From Software's framing aesthetics is what they would opt to go with if they found options that would work better for their game. But even though the game has no problem borrowing these elements from the Souls series, I think that on a scale of Platinum games to From Software, Stranger of Paradise leans more on the Platinum side. It's much faster and flashier than a typical Souls game, and there's a lot more different systems the game layers on top of the combat. There's no stamina meter, and you don't drop anything when you get killed. There's no interconnected world, you're just moving from level to level, although I do acknowledge that Demon Souls worked this way too. The fact that you have party members and the frequent cutscenes are also pretty big departures from what you could expect from a Souls game. Plus, there's the numbers appearing when you hit an enemy. Oh God, can you imagine if a From Software game did that? I'm pretty sure all Souls fans everywhere would have a collective stroke. But maybe discussing what genre Stranger of Paradise should slot into is a pointless endeavor. Genres can end up being reductive by nature. Labeling a game as one thing or another automatically gives you preconceived notions about what that game should be. Oftentimes, your brain will go to the most successful and definitive titles when making a comparison, like Mario for platformers or Call of Duty for first-person shooters. And going into a new game comparing it to those, usually the differences are going to feel uncomfortable or just downright bad. This conundrum isn't a new thing for games. Movies, music, and books have been dealing with this for a long time. Every fantasy movie is going to be compared to Lord of the Rings, and every gangster rap album is going to be compared to Straight Outta Compton. But of course you're always going to have genres. If you're recommending a game to someone, it's easier to just say, it's an action RPG, rather than describe every element in detail. At least this is better than saying a game is directly like another one, something that even developers seem to be doing more and more. You could argue that a Souls-like is an action game, but I think it's pretty clear that there's a distinction between Demon Souls and Astral Chain. I suppose that you could at least say that Souls-like is a subgenre of action, although it has carved out quite the sizable niche for itself. Really, it matters much less about what genre a game is than whether it's actually good or not. While it's more exciting to see trailblazers that create new mechanics and ideas, there's nothing nothing wrong with enjoying The Imitators. Stranger of Paradise might not be creating its own genre, but it is combining two different ones in a very well executed manner.